ahead and remove the center cap. There's a little notch in here. You want to go ahead and just pop a screwdriver on in there and gently pry that out. Remove your center cap, set that aside. Using a 19mm socket, we want to go ahead and remove the lug nuts. With the lug nuts now removed, we want to go ahead and remove the wheel and tire. Let's go ahead and remove the pad retainer clip. On the back side of your caliper, there are 2 rubber boots. This particular one has a plastic cap pressed into it. The other one should have had it, but ours is missing. So go ahead and remove your plastic caps if you have it. Underneath are Allen wrenches. Those are a number 7. I'm going to go ahead and loosen and remove both of those. I'm going to go ahead and use a pry bar here. We're just going to gently work this caliper out. Once we have our caliper loose, I'm going to go ahead and use a hanger. I'm going to go ahead and support this. Up and out of the way, like so. I'm going to go ahead and remove your brake pads and set those aside. Using an 18mm socket, go ahead and remove the caliper bracket bolts. Hold that bracket when you remove the other bolt. And remove the bracket. Grab your brake rotor, slide that off and set that aside. Using an 8mm socket, want to go ahead and remove the ABS sensor bolt right here. And just go ahead and wiggle that sensor carefully. We're going to use a small pick just to get up underneath as we wiggle this, trying to work that sensor out of the knuckle. Go ahead and set that aside. Using your pliers, go ahead and remove the cotter pin. Let's go ahead and remove the nut off of the tie rod end here. And remove the tie rod from the knuckle. I'm going to go ahead and remove our CV axle nut using a 32mm socket. I want to go ahead and make sure that our CV axle is loose. And we can move that in and out, so that's good. Using a 13mm deep socket, we want to go ahead and remove the pinch bolt for our lower ball joint. Using an 18mm socket and a 18mm wrench, I'm going to remove our lower strut bolt. I'm going to go ahead and remove the upper strut bolt here. Now I want to go ahead and remove these bolts. They're a little bit stuck in there. I do not want to use a hammer to smash the end because that might interfere with putting the nut back on. So we're going to use a rubber or dead blow hammer. Go ahead and work those out. Just going to use our wrench and slide the bolt out. Going to do the same for the bottom here. Now there's 2 points to removing this knuckle. This point here of the knuckle that goes into the strut, and then the lower point where the pinch bolt is on the lower ball joint. So we're going to manipulate both of these here to try to get the knuckle off. Using a pry bar, working the lower ball joint here. And try and work that off. If it doesn't want to come off, I'm going to use a screwdriver to go in the back here to try and open this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and work this up and off of that ball joint. You can see the ball joint beginning to expose itself here. This is where you want to hold on to that knuckle. That is loose. Let's go ahead and grab the knuckle. As we pull this out away from the strut, you also have your CV axle that you need to slide out through the hub itself. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and press out that ball joint. I'm going to go ahead and add some grease to the inside of the ball joint itself. And go ahead and slide our boot down into place. Okay, for the reassembly, we want to go ahead and slide the CV axle shaft into the hub itself. Now I want to go ahead and work the lower ball joint into the knuckle. Now we have those two lined up. Let's go ahead and line up the strut with the knuckle. With a few persuading bonks of the dead blow hammer, go ahead and get this worked in. And get our two lower strut bolts lined up. Let's go ahead and get the nuts started for the strut bolts. Let's go ahead and install our lower ball joint pinch bolt. We'll install the nut on the other side. We'll go ahead and snug that down. Let's go ahead and snug down those bottom pinch bolts. We'll go ahead and snug down our upper strut bolts here. We're going to torque the lower pinch bolt ball joint to 52 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and take our ABS sensor, insert it back into the knuckle, and work that in gently and get our bolt started. Let's go ahead and torque this bolt down to 80 inch-pounds. Let's go ahead and torque our upper strut bolts to 85 foot-pounds. I'm going to install our CV axle nut. I'm going to snug that down. Install your brake rotor. Going to take your bracket itself, hold that up there, and go ahead and snug down these bolts as far as you can. You want to go ahead and torque those bolts down. I'm going to torque these bolts down to 129 foot-pounds. ahead and bonk this down into place. Going to get the nut started on here. Then we're going to go ahead and torque that down. Torque this down to 41 foot-pounds. Once we have the castle nut lined up with the hole in the threaded portion, go ahead and install your cotter pin. I'm going to go ahead and take the excess on the cotter pin, fold it over, use your cutters, snip off the excess, and you're all set. I'm going to go ahead and tighten down our jam nut. Once that's tight, we're going to go ahead and take a pair of pliers and just line up the tie rod end so it's nice and level. Now on our caliper, we want to go ahead and push the brake piston into the caliper. Before we do so, I want to go ahead and remove the rubber boot off of the bleeder screw. We want to loosen this bleeder just so we can let the fluid come out when we compress this piston and make it a lot easier for us. Using a 10mm wrench, go ahead and put it on the bleeder. I'm going to go ahead and see if we can get that to move. All right, we got that moving a little bit. Using an old brake pad on the inside of the caliper. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and open up the bleeder. Just a little bit while we go ahead and compress. Now fluid is going to come out. You want to have a catch can or some towels or rags, something there to catch that fluid. I'm going to crank in the piston on the caliper using the C-clamp. Once that's bottomed out, we'll go ahead and tighten up the bleeder screw. Remove the C-clamp and the old pad. Just want to clean the surfaces where your brake pads are going to be going. Make sure that the piston side is clean. Do not use a wire brush on the rubber boot. Just make sure that that surface is clean. Now you want to go ahead and look inside the rubber boot here. This is where your slider pins here are going to be placed. Do an inspection, see if there's any debris in there. If there is, you want to go ahead and clean that out. Ours is pretty clean, so we're just going to run our finger inside the boot on both pieces here. I'm going to add a little bit of grease to the inside so that those slider pins move freely in and out. Now I'm going to add a small amount of grease right here, and on the back side. This is where the brake pads are going to move in. Just a light coating. Now we're going to take our pad, our outboard pad, line that up like so, push it up against the brake rotor. I want to go ahead and take our inboard pad that has the retainer clip. Grab your caliper, pull it off of the hanger. Line up your springs in here and go ahead and push that pad on. pop into place like so. Let's go ahead and line up our caliper just like that. Now we have our slider pins here. You want to go ahead and clean these. Inspect them, make sure there's no rust buildup, make sure the threads are good. Before you install these, I put a small dab of grease, smear it around, and then we're going to go ahead and put that in the backside inside that rubber boot. Install your slider pins, starting with the lower one here first. Once you get that lower one caught, repeat for the upper one. And we'll go ahead and snug these down. I'm going to torque this to 26 foot-pounds and repeat for the upper. Install your plastic caps on the caliper slide pin. Press this on, repeat for the upper one. I'm going to pop on our caliper retainer spring. Let's go ahead and install our wheel. Going to install our lug nuts. I'm going to start all these by hand, and then we'll zip them down and tighten them up. I'm going to go ahead and torque our lug nuts down to 98 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and torque the axle nut down to 221 foot-pounds. Now, installing your center cap, you're going to have these 5 rings on the back that snap over your lug nuts here, so line those up and then gently give it a bonk